First of all, everybody, thank you so much for coming. I appreciate it, and we're excited to have you here for our first, this is our trial run, our first ever Fireside Chat at Southwest Film Festival. Thank you to Bell and Ivy for hosting. We appreciate all your efforts, and Eden, thank you so much for all your work. And we're really happy to be here. We have a terrific panel today. I'm going to let them give a little bit of a brief bio of each of themselves. We've got Vinay, we've got Duncan, and we've got Bruce. And what we're going to try to do is this is very informal, and we just want to have a chat about sort of the current state of the entertainment industry as far as investment in content and intellectual property. And I wanted to explore two paths. There's most of the time, by the way, my name is Larry Weinberg. Sorry, I'm an attorney in the entertainment field. And one of the things that I tend to do is I sort of straddle two different worlds. One world which is investment in intellectual property ventures, companies, corporate investment. So if somebody's trying to create an ongoing entity that is going to be acquiring and developing and producing and ultimately exploiting intellectual property of all kinds, film, television, virtual reality, books, whatever the IP is, it's an ongoing venture. So I have been often asked to write business plans and to help capitalize these companies, and what goes into someone's analysis of making an investment or not in a company in a presentation like that. All three of our panelists actually today have experience in that world. They also have experience in the other world that I exist in, which is what we call single picture, single project investment. So someone comes to me and says, I have a movie, or I have a television show, I have a pilot, and I have a Bible for a television show, and I need money, I need investment. Where do I go? What do I do? So that's a very different analysis. Single project investment has its own sort of path and discussion. So those are the two worlds that I thought we could explore today. And we, our time, we're going to be doing this for, it's like 40 minutes or so. So we'll have our discussion. We will open it up to Q&A, so anybody, you'll have your opportunity to ask questions as well. So Vinay Singh, everybody.
Thanks, Larry. Hi, I'm Vinay. I'm a partner at a company called Archer Gray in New York, and essentially kind of two main things that we do. We develop, produce, and finance content broadly, probably most focused on feature and narrative films and feature documentary films. Just as examples, there's a film that premiered here at South by on Monday called The Day Shall Come that we produced, a narrative film starring Anna Kendrick and Marshawn Davis. We partnered with Seesaw on. Last year at the festival, we had a documentary called Transmilitary that won the Audience Award and is now available on lots of platforms. And then on the other side of the business, we're venture capital investors in early stage media tech companies at the seed and Series A stage. And it kind of ranges across all media verticals, but the kind of heart of it is that it's tech-enabled companies in the media space.
My name is Duncan, and I run a company called High Frequency Entertainment, which I manage for a guy named Jack Selby who runs Deal Capital. And we have a development fund that also has a small production component. We also run a thing which we lovingly call the Film Club, which is basically a group of folks who get a right of first refusal to invest alongside my partner. And we found that works a lot better than a traditional fund because most of the people we work with have some say. They want to be able to pass on projects. They want to be able to accept them. They want to read the script. They want to look at the package as opposed to just making one individual investment. And we develop our own stuff. And we've got a project right now that goes into production at the end of May that Larry has been working on for many years. We're very excited about it.
Cool. My name is Bruce Daitch, and I had been one of the first employees at DreamWorks Animation about 24 years ago. And I just stepped down last year. The last position was I was the chief operating officer and the chief financial officer for the company. So I left the end of last year, and I started up a company, and basically I'm helping a whole bunch of different startups, either in the entertainment space or otherwise, as well as some companies that are, they have IP and they're trying to figure out how to monetize that. by creating an entertainment arm. So my experience, different from some of these guys, supposed to be independent. I worked for a studio for a while, so obviously a bunch of the funding questions are quite different once you're actually in a studio and everything is self-funded. Also, my background's in animation, which probably has its own different challenges and opportunities with it. But there you go.
One of the things that you're starting to do now is help companies, startup companies, as well as some existing companies sort of transition from one part of media into another part.
Yes.
So I think you have some things to say that are relevant. Right. So why don't we start with corporate investment and the analysis that someone comes to you and says that I am trying to create a company that's going to acquire and develop film and television projects, or I'm interested in putting together a fund to finance multiple sort of a portfolio of intellectual property, product, film and television, VR. What are some of the things that you would look at to analyze the investment opportunity? One, to see if it's something that you'd be interested in, and two, how, if you do choose to pursue the investment, what are some of the things that you're going to discuss with the manager of this company, or the team, the management team? We'll start with you.
Sure. Well, I guess if somebody came to us with either of those pitches, here's a fund of kind of a slate of content, or here's a business that's going to fund and develop and produce film, we'd pass, because that's what we are. Not great diversification, but I guess kind of what do I think about as kind of partner of a business like that? And if you were taking the first question is, why do you take outside capital for that business? What are you going to promise to return? It is hard to build a business that just is a content business or just a production business that builds any kind of enterprise value. I mean, we do it through diversification and kind of diversification across formats. Our involvement, the revenue streams, therefore, coming in very different ways and different times, and we have the venture arm. But I think a lot of people have gone out and tried to raise capital around production companies or production and financing companies, and I can't really name a lot of successful ones that have just done that. So if I'm an investor, I guess I'm asking kind of like, what am I getting out of it? And it probably has to be something more than just pure financial returns, because that is a risky business. Sorry, but that's like a wet blanket on this whole conversation. Everybody go home. Yeah, exactly. I don't know. I can go on, but I want to hear other people's thoughts. I think there are ways to
that kind of does tell exactly how I hope them, which is we were one of those companies. I have obviously I've got kind of a significant anchor investor in everything we do. But we looked at going and raising a small, relatively $20–25 million fund. And what we found is most of the people that we worked with who had an interest didn't just want to hand a check over to somebody. They wanted to have more connection to the material. And I've heard from a lot of folks, I don't care about this business, I just want to see return, I want to see that. And that may be true for some people, but I haven't met those people yet. Because there's a hell of a lot more ways to make money than get into the independent film world. So what we found is what is more attractive is people having a sense of ownership. I read the script, I looked at the package, I made a choice to get involved, and it was successful. Pat myself on the back, I feel good about that, and I enjoyed it. Or there was a story out there, we did a marriage equality film a few years ago that did pretty well, and it was a project that people really felt passionate about, and it was something they wanted. You also, on the other hand, you get people who are like, that's not content or subject matter I want to be involved with, and so I want to pass on that, as opposed to handing a check to a group that's going to make those decisions. If you are entertaining that idea, then I think you just got to like the people you're working with. Ultimately, you got to have relationships with the people who are making those decisions. Someone's reading the script, and that's obviously where it starts. And then hopefully that fund will have some pretty hard and fast rules on how they reduce risk and manage risk for you. And as long as they stick to those rules, then you can figure out what your risk is, how much you're deferring, and those kind of things. So I think to some extent it depends on the investor and what I haven't found a lot of investors who said, okay, I'm just going to get into this business because I want to make money. Usually they want more connection to what's going on.
I've had that same experience, and one of the first questions that I tend to ask when I sit down with investors that are looking to get into the entertainment space is why. That's the so what is it that you're looking to accomplish? And the answers, it's been a myriad of answers. I've had answers like, well, you know, I'm very successful in this, but I've always wanted, I love music, I'm a musician, and I have my own band, and my daughter is going to NYU Film School, and and she wants to get into the film industry, and my you know, my creative juices that I lost and I forgot about, they came back to me, and I want to support her, and I want to see if I can get in, you know, and I want to get into the creative side of things as well. And that's just one story. That's a true story, by the way. It's just one story that of many where what is your motivation to getting into this space? Because if it's money, it's a very risky business. Bruce, you've had you know, your experience now. It'd be interesting to hear a little bit like with.
Well, I'm going to say for two things. Number one, an answer that I'm probably going to give for every single question you could ever ask. It's all about the people. Okay. Again, going from my experience of the years that I worked before, now I have the opportunity and the choice to basically work with whatever I want. And the thing that actually sits at the top is I want to love the people and respect the people that I actually do business with and work with. So that probably sits at the highest level of anything. If I take the emotional aspect, the content aspect, and I just put on a business hat, you know, the most important thing I'm looking for is whoever's coming to me, do they have the rights for everything? Because I gotta tell you, a lot of times people come and say, I've got the distribution rights theatrically, or I've got the consumer products rights for this. And it's like, every one of those single items is going to fail, and therefore I'm gonna make up my losses from the 7 other revenue streams that make up all my deficit. So unless they're free and clear, if they're giving me a, you know, a subset of the rights, it's not very interesting because you're banking on just, you know, a single point of success, you know, which just is too risky.
Yeah, it's having proprietary rights to something. That's another. It's another theme of the discussions with investors in content. What is it that is unique to you, and having proprietary rights to something? And boy, from the standpoint of ownership interest and underlying rights, it's always a very potentially scary area of our business that the underlying rights to what it is that producers are pursuing, they don't have them, or there's blemishes on them. We all have gone through our chain of title issues. That was one of the things that I want to talk about just a little bit when we talk about the single picture investment. But yeah, proprietary rights, what is it that's unique that you have that you can actually monetize? So I'm sure you experience this when you're looking for your investment opportunities, and what is it that you want? What is it that, you know, I'd be investing in? With regards to the, you know, the discussion that ensues when you are interested, can we talk a little bit about, okay, so this is intriguing to me. I'd love to hear what follows from there.
Yeah, I mean, I think the interesting thing, I think you touched on this, and you touched on this with your anecdote about the musician. Typically, people investing in film and content have made their money somewhere else. It's pretty rare that you have kind of somebody who made it, self-made, you know, rich person in media that then reinvesting into media and not diversifying off to something else. So inevitably, whatever they made their money in looks different from a kind of return standpoint, from a deal point standpoint, from if it's a single investment in a film versus an investment in a company, you know, everything looks different. So they made their money in real estate, they made their money in music, they made their money on Wall Street, and I don't know, inevitably they don't understand it, and that usually leads to friction. I'm sure you end up then solving that mess a lot of times. But, you know, so I think kind of, I guess I'm taking the standpoint of the production company and investors coming from the outside. It's kind of really alignment of, I think you said this, what do you want? You know, people invest significant money in other people's companies. They expect to have governance over it. They expect to hold shares. That doesn't really exist in the kind of media world, whether you're an EP of a film or whether you're kind of an investor in a production or financing entity. It can be negotiated, but that's not the ingoing assumption. And I think that leads to a lot of problems down the road. And people are like, well, is there no board of directors of this business? There's no, like, I don't own shares. I don't have voting rights. And, you know, the creatives are usually like, no, like, of course not. So I don't know. I think kind of there is that rub that you should, you know, address early on, because when it's not addressed, it just leads to everybody's unhappy, and then you're fighting each other. We've probably all seen it dozens of times. And it seems kind of obvious to say out here, but like people come, as an example, from real estate, and they think they understand that it's project work in film, it's project work in real estate, it's going to look the same way. It looks nothing like that in every regard, from the financing standpoint, from the legal standpoint, from chain of title versus title deeds on land. There's similarities, but it's all different. And so I guess have a good lawyer. This will be an advertisement for you, but also have really close alignment with what that person thinks they're gonna get.
Yeah. And I would say, it sounds hard to say, but turn people down if it's not a good fit. You're going to know a lot better if it's a good fit than I will. And that's been my experience. And you can get a pretty good idea pretty quickly of whether this is going to be someone who's, it always seems the smallest investor who I just needed at the 11th hour ends up being the most difficult personality. Most of the people, if you're an accredited investor, you've probably got an ego because you've been successful in some of the world.
What is an accredited investor versus an unaccredited investor?
So you've got a net worth of $1 million, and then you make over 500 grand per year with your spouse, I think, jointly, or 250 individually.
And make sure that the spouse signs the
Right.
paperwork as well. We had a debacle one time where the spouse did not sign something, and there was of course a subsequent divorce, and it led to a very unpleasant experience
This is the
for everybody.
note-taking moment. These are things that don't ever get said. It's like spouse sign.
There's something called a subscription agreement,
Right.
that when you make an investment, and that subscription agreement for everybody is the sort of catch-all. You may lose every single dime that you invest, but don't ever call me back to complain about it. That's
Right.
basically what the subscription agreement is. And in there is a it's like on page 5, but have your spouse sign.
Right.
Okay.
And the accredited definition cracks me up. I feel like
Yeah.
Mike Myers, like $1 million.
That's it.
But yeah, I think that having that relationship, having that trust, is probably arguably the most important, because you're just, and the way we build pretty close relationships with folks, and everybody who's gotten involved with us has had the ability, they've seen everything and been able to pass. So we try to give them numerous opportunities to create that kind of portfolio investment feel, but we also allow them to pass on stuff. And then I think just communication. You can be annoying. It's so much, I see more problems with people who just, the only time they were talking to investors is when they're sending their K1s. And that's a real problem. Keep them in the loop, talk to them over and over and over again. And even, you'll have people who act like they don't care all the time, and then the minute they feel somehow disconnected, they care. So it sounds silly, but I think
That's
communication is
an
critical.
excellent point. I have a client it's a team, and one of the most impressive things that they do, they have a gift for raising sort of in that $2-3 million independent film range. They've just had a lot of success and doing very well. But they had come from the studio world. They made very, very big, large studio productions. And one of the most impressive things that I've seen them do is this monthly newsletter. A monthly newsletter goes out to all of their investors. It's amazing. And on one of the movies, they have almost 30 investors. They have almost, it was one of those, $30,000, $25,000, $50,000. The movie fortunately did well. It made money, and all those 30 investors have gotten their money back plus some. But they have this newsletter, and it's a great example. And I've never had a complaint. Nobody on any of their movies have I ever had a complaint from an investor. All right, so great suggestion.
Before I answer that, I got to tell you on that, this whole notion of communicating with the investors, I can't tell you how many times people have actually expressed their excitement for wanting to invest again just because of the way they were treated as an investor, irrespective of its performance. They just felt like they were knowing what's going on. And there were people that even in success, that hadn't known it yet, basically bailed because they just didn't feel like they were part of the mix.
Right.
So that relationship part goes well even beyond their ROI. So, yes, when it comes down to everybody wants to make a buck, but So going back to the other thing, I break the decision down into two pieces. There is the creative and the visionary who actually is holding the keys to the story, and then there's the execution, okay? And both of those go back to conversations we were talking about before, which is the people, okay? I would actually invest in something where it's very clear that the story, okay, and who holds the keys to the vision is very clear, understood, and the story is fantastic. But then you basically have to flip to saying, okay, great, now there's an execution, and that has a whole bunch of other check marks associated with how is this going to get executed such that my investment is protected. Because a great story can be poorly executed, and the best execution can't save a great story. So it goes both ways.
I think that Bruce and Vinay both pointed out something about our industry, and it's distressing. It is something that I've heard a number of times over my career, and that is that our industry has a reputation for disrespecting money. And you intimated at it, which is just your checkbook, give me my money, I'm the producer, I'm the artist, let me go make my art, and just go away. That's not true in all respects, but it is a reputation that our industry has developed and in some ways deserves. And so the point being, and both pointed out very well, do not disrespect the money. And that comes in many different ways. One, treating it as if it's your own money. It's like that wonderful little pylon that you see on the streets in Brentwood or other neighborhoods. Drive like your children live here, or drive like your children are playing on the street. Which is, treat the money as if it's yours, and also the communication. And it's so simple. It's so simple. Communicate. And people, unfortunately, they don't abide by that. So live with that simplistic, recommendation.
And in all our projects, we invest alongside Para Pursue with all our investors.
Mm-hmm.
So it's one thing to say the right thing, and it's another thing to back it up and actually do it. And so, our interests are all aligned. But to that point, I did a film with a very successful, very famous producer who's been around forever and ever. And he absolutely disrespected the money. And we made the film, it was successful, we made money, and he called me a year later and was like, hey, basically, can I try to steal your seed investor? I've known since I was 6th grade, so I was like, you're welcome to talk to him, And I'm having a hard time, I want to put together a fund. And I have this list of projects and films, and I've had all this success, and I've been nominated for Academy Awards, I've done all these things. And he never could raise a fund. He couldn't do it because A, he had the reputation, and B, the minute he started talking, he was lecturing someone who, had been very, very successful in their field, and he just turned everybody off.
Well, the thing, I don't know if this is where we want the panel to go, but I think has happened, at least, I think that used to come from, film and media is sexy, and there was this kind of never-ending supply of money, and the people would come in and get burned because producers, because whomever didn't kind of, approach it the right way, and it didn't matter because there was money behind them. Mm-hmm. And then a few things happened, the 2002 downturn happened, the 2008 downturn happened, those people all got washed out. But also the people that have kind of sprouted up, or the companies that have sprouted up post-2008, are in it for the long haul, which is, I think, it's great for the business, but it also, you can't disrespect them because the people that you're going to need to go to your next, it's not this endless supply of kind of rich dentists, which is the kind of joke / true way you got money in the maybe 90s. And so I think it behooves you, if you want to be in this business for a long time, that you should have a good relationship with the money, because they're going to be the same people funding next year's batch of projects.
Exactly, the rich dentist. It's so funny. I used to joke about how in the 90s and the early 2000s, I worked with every one of those. We call them the kings of. The king of sausage from New Zealand, the king of envelope making from Minnesota, the king of the gynecology world from Long Island, the king of furniture manufacturing from North Carolina. I worked with every one of them on movies, and very, very few of them did come back. But no, right, it is a little bit of a different one. I do want to talk a little bit about trends, but before we get to sort of trends in content creation and content investment today, post the two traumatic moments in our industry, I want to talk a little bit about single picture, single project investment, because there is a difference. All right, it's a different analysis, and I want to talk a little bit about, and I know all of you have this experience, the difference between equity and debt, and then sort of what is the sort of the historical model of single project and financing with some debt, with some equity. Now we all know, that these tax incentive programs that exist all over the country and all over the world, most content that's getting created today has some form of that piece to the model. So let's shift gears a little bit and get to let's say motion picture for the sake of our discussion. It's a single picture project. So Duncan, Silk Road. We can start with Silk Road. It's a very classic model of how a motion picture gets financed, and we can talk about in the tech world, sort of.
I'm the exception. Got it.
The exception. You are. All right. So Duncan, why don't we start with?
Yeah. So the project he's referencing is the film that we're shooting in May. He represents the original producers who optioned the Rolling Stone article about the story. They then ultimately ended up getting to Imagine. Imagine had a shopping deal with it. I think Imagine saw it as a much bigger picture. Couldn't get it put together. And this has never happened in my life. It'll probably never happen again. But I grew up with the writer, director, producer, lead financier. Wow. And we've all known each other since 6th grade. And the other, and that guy's the old. He's late to the party. He's best known each other since 1st grade, which is crazy. So that's a project that is, like you said, very classically put together. We have two kind of sections of debt. One is financing against the tax credits. In this case, we're shooting in New Mexico. There's an estimated amount of what that will be, the value of that. And then we'll bank those credits and get 90% of that and put that into the budget. The rest is pre-sales, so we took it to the Berlin film market based on our cast and the overall quality of the picture and the package. We sold X amount of territories for what was estimated, which is a big deal.
Yeah.
We get these estimates from different foreign sales companies, and there's a handful of really good companies out there that you can feel pretty strongly and trust what they're saying, what their estimates are. And there's a whole bunch of companies that their estimates are total horseshit. They're just telling you that to get the business, and then they have a hard time collecting because they don't have very good reputations, and they don't have really good buyers in the first place. So avoid all those companies. And you can figure out, you can talk to an agency, you can figure out those top 10 or top 7 or whatever pretty quickly. So usually, in this case, sometimes we'll go to a sales company and they'll have their own financing arm. In this case, we're doing it the hard way. And we, which is another story in and of itself. We passed on an offer to do it that way from a company called Mr. Smith, which I'm not sure I should have, but anyways, that's because we wanted to sell a portion of it, prove their estimates were real, and then go bank cash flow as much of the remaining estimates as possible and put it in the film. So those tax credits, those pre-sales / unsold estimates, those are kind of your debt pieces. And then typically against the domestic sale, you've got your risk piece, which is your equity. We like to keep that somewhere in the 25% range. I always say that. I always end up closer to the 30% range. And that's your real risk. You got to go out there. Now, once you've made those foreign sales, you feel a little better. There's a market for this film. Someone in the business is saying, okay, I will buy this movie because I like these actors, I like this script, I like this director, I like this crew. But that doesn't necessarily perfectly transfer over to the domestic market. And I will say this, I got yelled at the other day. I've never, it's just like, what? Domestic. He was like, no, you should say North America. And then you should say, tell
North America inclusive
tell Hollywood
or non-inclusive
to stop saying
Canada.
domestic U.S. box office. You know what I mean? Anyways, North America instead of domestic, to be clear, because he was out of London and he took umbrage to that. Yeah, I've never had that happen before.
I've never had that happen.
And that's what I told him. I said, you should call for Riot because I keep saying domestic U.S. box office. But anyway, so that risk is significant on that gap. So I mean, you've got to go then take it. In this instance, we've sold the last film we did. We sold off just kind of off 17 minutes at Berlin. which was good because the film didn't do as well once it actually, we got a bad review on when we released. But you know, and then I would say, let's say you got $2 million in that gap, I would conservatively apply 20% to that, and that's your break-even number, because you're going to have all the unions, roughly 9% are going to average out. Depending on what deal, who sold your films, you'll have a domestic rep, probably one of the agencies. They'll then sell that. They'll try to get you to sign up for 10% against that domestic sale. We try to get them down to 5%, and then they try to do a ladder, an escalator, blah, blah, blah. But that's really, I would add 20% to be conservative to it. So, you know, you got 2.4, those, they're not handing out those kind of sales. The streaming companies have had significant effect on that. You know, this Sundance was remarkable. I've never seen anything like it. How many 13 million plus sales? And a couple of those were domestic only.
Yeah.
So it's kind of phenomenal. I mean, I remember you know, what was it? Birth of the Nation sold for 11 a few years ago, and everybody freaked out.
2 years ago, it was actually more than 11. I worked with both of the financiers in that movie, both of the lead producers. They actually sold it for $17.5 million. And they had an offer on the table from Netflix for about $23 million, but the filmmakers insisted that the movie get a theatrical release, so they turned down approximately $5 million, only to then have those same filmmakers get embroiled in a massive scandal, which destroyed the release of the movie literally weeks before the Academy Awards and weeks before the release of the movie. It was awful, and they got caught in that the whirlpool that was the Me Too movement, and the lead actor, filmmaker, writer, director, producer, it was revealed had gone to trial for raping a girl with a wrestling partner from I think it was Penn State University. So that $17.5 million, which seemed unbelievable at the time, and it was projected to make over $100 million. They were wishing that they had that other $5 million back that Netflix had. So that was a terrible story. Unfortunately, I don't want to bring the crowd down. They still all made a lot of money, though. $17.5 million as an advance against the domestic rights of the movie.
That was all advance. No, that was DNA.
Was all in advance. It was in advance. Thank God for them.
Yeah.
All right. I had both investors as clients, and they were. But it was terrible. It was an awful moment. Yes, Blake.
Can you guys tell me about the craziest thing you've done to finance a film?
Oh man.
Spent 3 days with Gary Busey.
Best answer ever.
We did like a little sizzle reel, and he was the star of the sizzle reel.
Yeah.
Wow.
Can we get it on the screen, please?
It ended up being that movie, unfortunately.
Wow.
But, and he would have killed the film. He'd have been awesome. But we just couldn't. He was a psychopath. He was truly a psychopath. I mean, we had to. I will do a short version of this, but he missed his initial flight, which was a direct flight. We shot it here. He missed his initial flight coming from LA, and so the next flight, the only other flight he'd get on, had a stop in Dallas. And he got off the airplane and he locked himself into a family restroom. And I had to hire a friend of mine in Dallas to buy a ticket, go in, convince him to come out, and then put him on his next flight. So that was that's how we started these 3 days. It was terrible. And then my partner wanted to do a documentary called The Lives and Deaths of Gary Busey, because he's flatlined 3 times. And I was like, what are these 3 days? So that's the crazy thing.
Vinay.
I can't follow that.
Brilliant.
Beg the financier. No, I don't know if I have anything crazy. Definitely not on that level. But there's kind of just prototypically a bunch of begging, borrowing, and stealing. I think that goes in to kind of herd all the financiers into place. I mean, we've been lucky at Archer Gray, I think, to have really great partners doing a movie with Netflix. Larry's working on. We just wrapped the movie with Fox Searchlight, the movie that's here at the festivals with Film Nation and Film Florence. So we've been pretty lucky, I would say. you know, we had a
Have
crazy
you-
thing happen. This movie, Can You Ever Forgive Me, that we did with Fox Searchlight, you know, fell apart a day before shooting with the initial cast and director. You know, and I think credit to Ann Carey, who's our president of production, and Amy, our the head of our company. They remounted it with Melissa McCarthy and Mari Heller directing, and it's, you know, an amazing movie we're very, very proud of, and it feels like that should have always been the package, but, you know, it was devastating, sure, when it fell apart, you know, a day before shoot.
Perfect segue to my next question is the word package, actually. So Duncan gave us kind of the broad strokes of the financing model. To get there, independent films need to be packaged, right? There's the development process and the packaging process. Can you talk a little bit about, and this is something that your company is actually terrific at. Can you talk a little bit about how important that is to securing the sales company that Duncan was talking about, to securing that piece of equity?
Sure. Maybe I'll take the development piece, maybe, and then somebody else can
Okay.
take packaging, so I'll talk the whole time. But, you know, so we get involved very early. We typically are optioning rights to, you know, IP, intellectual property, at a very early stage. Either it's an original idea in the screenwriter's mind, more likely it's an article, it's a novel, it's a documentary, it's you know, some piece of content that we see as being, you know, kind of a story that should be told in narrative feature-length format. And so we option it in partnership with a writer-director, and kind of take it through that development phase, which is in part the creative phase and in part kind of oddly a legal heavy phase. You know, you referenced chain of title. We obsess over kind of who owns the rights to the piece of material. If it's about a true person, who owns those life rights? How do we, you know, who are the people around that, and do we need to get their life rights? And it's never cut and dry. You would think for how many times that we've done this, it's cut and dry. It's never cut and dry. So there's a lot of kind of groundwork that goes into just even like the first kind of the writer putting pen to paper on the first page of the screenplay that we spend a lot of our time and kind of attention on. And then there's also the kind of structuring the finance at that stage, because I would say there's kind of three major financing stages of a movie. There's the development phase, and ideally the people that put money in that phase are taking their money out when the movie is greenlit and start shooting. Then there's the production phase of the movie. Hopefully, if all goes well, the people are getting that money out of in advance at the kind of point at which the movie is finished, and the distributor comes on board. And then there's the distribution phase where the distributor is trying to make money, and depending on whether or not the production financiers got out or not, they're also, you know, extremely interested financially in how that goes, because they might need to get their money on the back end of that. So anyway, in the development phase, it's kind of a very unique type of financing deal where you're trying to set yourself up to hopefully be able to kind of do the creative work that attracts the right people, which is the packaging. I'll hand that off to somebody else. And so that you can get the movie greenlit, and greenlit at a scale that you can pull out the money that you put in early, which could be, you know, that phase takes anywhere from maybe best case scenario a year to Can You Ever Forgive Me was a memoir that Anne optioned in 2009, and the movie just came out. So
Ironic.
Yeah. We've
What's
had
That was an ironic.
the last, I would say, the last 6 films that I've worked on that were produced, the range is from 16 years, 15 years, 2003 to 2018, to 1 year. And the 1 year, actually under 1 year, is such an anomaly, and it was one of those dream projects where it was an original screenplay that was written and will be directed by the same person, had never been optioned or encumbered ever before, and one entity wanted to finance it. That's the dream. That's the literally going around the carousel trying to reach for that golden ring. So we're getting to the end of the panel, and I want to leave some room for some questions. Thank you, Blaine, for that fun question. No, it's a very common question. Tell me the craziest thing that happened to you. You know, it's people like to know. That's part of the fun of what we do, is that we do have a lot of crazy stories. I get the phone calls, and it's almost on every project I work on. The lead actor has disappeared. Where is the lead actor? The lead actor is gone. The lead actor had been very difficult to insure because the lead actor was an alcoholic. and the lead actor ended up being found 2 days later on the hood of his car in the desert outside of Palm Springs. Those are crazy stories. They do happen. But it keeps you young, it keeps you excited, and it makes you and it keeps us coming back, obviously. So I want to switch gears just slightly, just to talk a little bit about trends in our industry as far as content. And Bruce, why don't we talk a little bit? You've got some interesting things that you're doing now since you left DreamWorks. One of the things that I'm intrigued by that you're working on is helping this gaming company sort of make the transition into what might be deemed traditional content, film and television, and how that, in some of the stories you've told me, is that how are you protecting them from themselves, actually?
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about trends? Really, I know you can't tell us exactly that, but
Well, I'll generalize in some regard. Again, the holy grail in the entertainment space, okay, is to de-risk whatever you're trying to do. And typically, you actually have reduced risk when you're talking about sequels or IP that's recognized, as opposed to brand new. When it comes to brand new, okay, at least on the theatrical side, for a big blockbuster, that's where you're spending $150 million worldwide to make sure the world recognizes this new character, this new story, this new world you're working on. When you actually have a sequel, okay, you don't have to do anything like that. So for some of these companies, like a gaming company that actually is sitting on remarkable intellectual property and characters, they're already sitting pretty from the point of view of they already have characters that are not only recognized, but are being demanded because we have very specific specs that we can actually read up on about how many daily active players and whatnot. It's something that everybody can read up on. So again, you already know your demand. So the problem is that if you look into history, the number of the gaming companies have actually taken their IP and they've tried to turn it into a television show or a movie. And unfortunately, what ends up happening is usually the gaming companies are not the best storytellers, okay? So you've basically taken a fantastic IP and you've introduced them into a crappy story, and all of a sudden has tarnished their image, okay, and their brand worldwide. So I think the careful balance that you have to is how do you actually protect the IP and introduce them in a place that will people, the people that know the characters today, which in the gaming world are gamers, and the people who are film and television goers who may not be gamers, for them to see this as pure entertainment and have nothing to do with a game. So I think it's a fine line, and I'm trying to help them because the entire company is built on gamers. Okay, they have nobody who are storytellers because there is no story in a game. Effectively, the user is the one that actually dictates what happens next, generally speaking. So it's just a fine line about how to protect their image and how to entertain the audience and grab the gaming audience as well as the typical entertainment audience of just moviegoers and television viewers. So it's an unbelievable opportunity. I think the sky's the limit, but if you do it wrong, it's the kiss of death. So that's kind of where
I think you touched on the crux of the matter, which is what we were talking about outside, storytelling. All right, we have all this new technology that everybody's buzzing about, and virtual reality, augmented reality, AI, and, multimedia, 4D, and there's so much talk and so much buzz. But what's real and what's not real? What's capable of sustaining good storytelling? And I mentioned to you outside, the best virtual reality experience that I've had to date was a real story, and it was compelling, and it drew me in, as opposed to my favorite experience, which was swimming with dolphins. And there was no story to it. I just floated around and I swam with dolphins, and it was exciting. And the technology was great. Can you talk a little bit, Vinay, look to hear
About
your
dolphins?
thoughts? About dolphins, yeah. I swam with the dolphins. Just your thoughts on merging of technology with good storytelling, and is it going to work?
Yeah, and I guess it sounds cliche, but at least at our company, it all starts with storytelling. You know, we really are focused on that. It's why we almost don't ever embark on any kind of project, any type of creative project, without a filmmaker, but broadly defined, a creator, you know, at the helm of that. And so I think, you know, we believe that, yeah, the storytelling kind of is going to cut through all the noise, and if it is, you know, somebody with a singular vision for a story that should be told in today's day and age, it'll find its way into the world, or at least have a much better chance. We're not producing stuff, I would say, that's on the very kind of, you know, new media cutting edge. We have not done VR in-house. I think, you know, the principles, to your point, the thing that worked for you was grounded in good storytelling, but I think we're waiting kind of, you know, whether it's that or whether it's augmented reality or kind of even where storytelling and gaming are going to meet, I think we're waiting for a new class of creators to come up, you know, that are not trained to work in the 2D format of long form feature or whatever. And I think that will take time. It's not to say that filmmakers can't jump back and forth, but I think VR in particular, all the immersive kind of formats, is a totally different type of storytelling, and I'm just not sure, you know, we need there to be an NYU program, a BU program, a UCLA program, and they're starting to sprout up, and to train those people, or even if there's not programs, they need to kind of grow up thinking in that medium and then create stories in that medium, and it's just going to take time. I don't think we're quite there yet.
So I'm going to have to wrap up now. Do we have any time for, if anybody has any questions?
So I have
Yes.
a question for you. So you spoke a little bit about the three segments of, let's say, an investor. The initial part, then you get, you know, blah, blah, blah. As a guy that, I'll use marginally successful outside of the entertainment field, okay, wanting to be in that field, I know what I can make outside of this field. You know, smart, I think, to a point. I come to you and I say, I want to get in. Any three of you or whoever it may be, what can I expect? Like if I'm in that initial stage, or if I want to say I really love this project, I want to go all the way to the end, can you give me just, for us, real broad guidelines of what a return could be for the average person that says, I have $1 million, or I have $100,000, or I have $25,000 times 30 people that want to do this. Can you, and I'm not saying you say, okay, it's 5%, it's 3%, it's 30%, because there's blockbusters out there that you think they happen, right? It's low budget film, but somebody believes in it's a great story, and the production value is pretty good, and all of a sudden it's a $150 million film that costs $20 million or whatever it make, and everybody's happy, right? So,
I mean, I almost think it's just easier just to actually talk numbers. So
Okay, yeah.
That's almost easier than kind of pontificating
Yeah,
about
sure.
what it could be or
Yeah,
might be.
sure.
You know, at the development phase, for every dollar you put in, you're hoping to get if the movie is greenlit, and that is the big question.
Yeah,
of
sure.
the
It's
development
always,
phase.
yeah.
You know, somewhere between a 30 and 50% premium. And 50 is high, but you try to get it, you get pushed down to 30. So
Sure.
then you have to handicap that against how many films actually make it from the idea to the green light stage. We'll park that. If you're a production financier, I mean, there's kind of three tiers, as he alluded to. The equity is typically asking for a 20 to 25% premium.
Sure.
The kind of mezzanine debt is usually asking for low teens, and the senior debt's asking for, let's call it LIBOR plus 2. I don't know what it is right now, but you know,
6,
middle single digits.
Okay, yeah.
And then again, of course, you have to handicap it against: does the movie actually work? Does it
Yeah.
sell at Sundance,
Yeah.
or does it? Is it you know? And I maybe kick the kind of distribution returns to you, Bruce, because you've been way closer to it than I do. But you know, I don't know what, as an entity, a studio is trying to get on distribution.
Well, I can tell you from a green lighting point of view, there are companies that basically say, unless I'm getting 30%, I'm not interested.
Right.
Most actually don't have that bar. Most it's a 15% return. Okay, and
I've
it's
seen
cash
both
on
already,
cash.
That they
and
think
that's
they're hot shit, pardon my French, but they're 30% or go away, and then you talk to 3 more people and they're like 18.
no 15 is much more normal.
Yeah.
30 are
Yeah.
People that basically have
Kind of going what you're saying
Yeah.
about, you know, the top 7 are good, and then you got those guys that are like they actually can't collect. You know,
Yeah.
You know. So
What's interesting is that number changes depending on whether you're in live action or animation.
Okay.
So animation's higher than 15.
Okay.
Just because there are many other angles to basically recoup your money.
Exactly.
Because
Right.
of consumer products and other places.
franchise.
So the break even
Right.
effectively is actually higher.
Okay, and to go back to what you were saying, so like the 3 stages, right? The first one's by far the most risky, right? You just have this idea or this IP, and therefore a guy like me is like, okay, Larry, I love your idea. I'm going to give you some money, but I expect a lot to return when you go from here to there. The second one, you've already got some traction. You're moving, you're people are interested, blah, blah, and so that number comes down. The third one, you've already got all that stuff, and you're at Sundance or you're at whatever, and people are already interested because they've already heard or seen that 17-minute film, and they're giving you money up front to say, show up, and then I'll take my 10% or 8% or 6% or whatever it is. Am I kind of understanding what you're kind of the risk reward in that space? Does that make sense of what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Early on, highest risk, right? There's 1,000 ideas, there's 1,000,000 ideas, or whatever it is. You get over here, there's 20 good films, or 100, or whatever that number is you guys you're in the industry this year or next year, or the pipeline. So, okay, I just
Keep in mind at the studio level, which again is not single films,
Right.
this is a hits business.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
reason you are there is for a portfolio.
Right.
Because you get a one hit, and that one hit is going to pay for 15 losses.
yeah, you're skipping those. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I apologize. I appreciate
No,
it.
don't apologize at all. That's why you're here. Thank you. This is excellent questions. Really good questions. Gail, did you,
Yeah,
were you
question.
raising?
I'm wondering what you guys are seeing on the whole insistence and diversity thing, and who's coming to pitch to you, things that are getting greenlit, things that you're greenlighting, questions about the lack of women getting funding for directing projects and lack of awards, all that stuff. I don't have to tell you. You guys, I'm sure, are hearing it daily. So I'm wondering two things: what is your company doing about the outcry, and then, I just sort of what your feelings are on it.
Can I answer? I'm just going to answer one real quick, which is it was very interesting a couple of years ago when this thing started to grow huge. We actually, Gina Davis actually came in and pitched a program that she actually had had a company invested in, which basically ran your script, okay, through a program.
Stacey Smith's program.
I have to tell you,
Yeah.
I was blown away impressed that it had that capability. We had no idea how things escaped us.
Yeah.
And like somebody actually evaluated all 32 movies
Yep.
and said, do you realize that the demographics of your movies were X, Y, and Z?
Right.
We had no idea. And we wrote that it was like, oh my God, it opened up our eyes so much that we had a newfound respect for how to review a script from a completely different lens.
Cool.
That is fantastic.
Fantastic.
That's Stacey Smith's work at USC.
It
correct?
is.
Fantastic.
I'd say it's constant. I mean, we have these conversations. We're a very small company, so I've got 2 or 3 producers I've worked with over the years who I'm close to, who I adore. And I would say it's a constant conversation. We've got a project right now called Vengeance is the Lord's, which was based on a play, and some underlying IP was the play, developed out of the Labyrinth Theater in New York. And we're having a conversation right now about changing some of these characters, and we're talking to the playwright about it. But there's this is some material he's been with for 30 years, I think there is a way to, with this specific project, it goes back to story and all these other things we're talking about. What these characters are feeling and what their arc is less. This is more of a question about race and changing the race of one of the lead characters. It can be done relatively seamlessly because of the world we're in, and the playwright is down, and then we're tinkering with his baby,
I have a follow-up on that then, because one of my side gigs is I created a class on spy novel diplomacy.
Okay.
And I'm basically teaching espionage, intelligence gathering, and propaganda, but it's through the gender studies program at USC. And so we're teaching, it's not quite James Bond versus La Femme Nikita, but it kind of is. And so I think one of the big debates that happened with these amazing students that I had this past semester was, what can you do with James Bond? Do you take James Bond in the era of Me Too and essentially, for lack of a better term, castrate him because he's a misogynist, hard drinking, and so there was a phenomenal debate in the class of what do you do with a character who's beloved because of these attributes that are no longer okay? What do you do?
I want to share with you just one thing, and then Vinay, did you want to add something? Because your company, I know, because of Anne,
I
my
guess,
experience with
the
Anne.
caveat, I suppose you're asking the question of 4 dudes up here.
I'm aware of it. Don't worry.
Yeah, we.
But I would just say, if you look at our body of work, over half the films are directed by women. We had a movie at Berlin that was directed by a man, but the star of the movie was a female spy. I don't know. It goes down to kind of, we want the stories we tell I think it's both good business and good citizenship for them to reflect the world we live in. Lots can be made of all the movies, whether it's Get Out or whatever, that people are like, oh my gosh, how did it do so well? Duh. Those people are so underserved, those groups are so underserved that you could almost give them bad movies and they're going to do well. That will change, obviously, and hopefully it's changes. But anyway, so there are areas that we purposefully, I think, are trying to over-index. So we have a partnership with Above Average, which is a comedy digital studio, to do digital comedy series, and it's very specifically for women and people of color to be in front and behind the camera. Because in all aspects of media, but in comedy in particular, that has been a hard place for, and it's changing, which is wonderful. But it's been the kind of province of white men, frankly. And so anyway, we're trying. There are areas where I think we're doing it more by edict or mandate, but mostly I think it's in our DNA.
It's good business.
Yeah, and it's good business.
And if I could just add something, these two wonderful gentlemen, Anastasia and I are founders of a tech entertainment startup, and these two wonderful gentlemen have been advising us and introducing us to people in the industry. So I personally know that they've been very supportive in that sense. Yeah.
And I'm just going to add one last thing. I did my first contract for a major distributor where in the contract, and it's based on a book, and where we had to write in, and it's boldface and it's underlined, that there are, I think it's 5 characters or 6 characters, that we are not allowed to change the race, we are not allowed to change the gender, and when we cast, we are also not allowed to get away with things, which often our business has been able to do. When they make certain promises, then they go, well,
You mean Scarlett Johansson's not going to be in everything?
Well, she did play a young Asian woman very well, and I think we have to stop making those kinds of movies that they don't seem to perform. But on that note, thank you so much, everybody. Thank you guys. You were fantastic. All right, so Eden, before you go,
The bar is going to be open for another 15 minutes. We're going to do another 15 minutes, get refreshed, have a drink, have some food.
and then our next
Some
panel.
photos with you 4.
Sure.
Yeah.
Did we do